The air inside the courtroom was suffocating, thick with tension. The gallery was packed. Reporters, local residents, and curious onlookers filled every seat, all eyes on the young man sitting at the defendant's table. Dante Harris, 22 years old, was facing charges for a crime he swore he didn't commit. His heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the trial pressed down on him. The system had already labeled him guilty. Now it was up to fate, up to 12 jurors who might decide whether he would walk free or be condemned forever. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. News vans lined the street, journalists ready to capture the next headline. A young black man accused of murder. The story was a familiar one that had become all too common in the streets of Atlanta. But inside, Dante sat in silence, hands folded, trying not to let his fears show. He knew the stakes. He knew what this trial was really about. It began on a seemingly normal September night in Atlanta. Martin Levins, a gas station clerk who had worked the night shift for years without incident, was found dead behind the counter. The cause of death? A bullet wound to the chest. A robbery gone wrong, the police claimed. The security footage was grainy, and the suspect in the video was a tall, broad-shouldered figure wearing a hoodie, just like every other suspect in every other robbery. There was no clear evidence, no weapon, and no DNA to link anyone to the crime. But there was one thing. Dante's wallet was found near the scene, 2 blocks away from the gas station. The police didn't need much else to begin building their case. It didn't matter that Dante had reported his wallet stolen a day before the murder. It didn't matter that he had an alibi. His best friend Carlos and his girlfriend, Jasmine, had been with him at a party across town. It didn't even matter that Dante's fingerprints were nowhere near the gas station, and there were no signs of him at the scene. What mattered was that the wallet, found conveniently close to the crime, had sealed his fate. The police had their man. Prosecutor Richard Mason was a seasoned trial lawyer with a reputation for being relentless. To him, this case was more than a job, it was a chance to make a name for himself. His strategy was simple. Paint Dante as a man desperate for money, a struggling dropout with nothing to lose. The defendant had everything to gain from this crime, Mason declared as he paced the courtroom. A college dropout, deep in debt with bills stacking up. When the opportunity presented itself, cash in a register at the gas station, he took it. A quick way to fix his problems. Meanwhile, Dante's defense attorney, Kate Stevens, barely seemed to register in the courtroom. She was overworked, overwhelmed, and underprepared. Assigned to Dante's case just a week before the trial began, she was a public defender with little time to form a proper defense. When she stood to speak, it was clear that her approach lacked conviction. "My client maintains his innocence," she muttered, her voice wavering. Dante's frustration bubbled to the surface. His life was on the line and he could feel the courtroom turning against him. He was a black man in America, surrounded by an all-white jury, and it was clear they weren't interested in finding the truth. They had already decided he was guilty. Just when all hope seemed lost, a new figure entered the courtroom. The doors swung open, and in walked a woman dressed in a tailored suit, her heels clicking against the cold marble floor with the precision of someone who knew exactly how to command attention. "My name is Sarah Ellis," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. "And I will be taking over Mr. Harris's defense." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Sarah Ellis was a well-known criminal defense attorney, one of the most successful in the state. Her reputation for taking on high-profile cases and winning against all odds was legendary. But why was she here? Why had she come to represent Dante at the last minute? Mason's face twisted with irritation as he shot up from his seat. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "What's irregular?" Sarah interrupted, her eyes locking onto his with unshakable confidence. "Is that my client is being tried on nothing but assumptions and circumstantial evidence. The facts have been ignored, and I cannot stand by and watch an innocent man be convicted." The judge hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Ms. Ellis, you're granted permission to take over the defense." In an instant the courtroom shifted. The power balance had changed. It was no longer Mason running the show. Now Sarah Ellis was in control. Sarah moved quickly, dissecting the prosecution's case piece by piece. First, she demolished the timeline Mason had built, proving that Dante couldn't have possibly been at the gas station when the murder occurred. He had been miles away, with Carlos and Jasmine providing rock-solid testimony to confirm his whereabouts. But it didn't end there. Sarah had a trump card, a piece of evidence the prosecution had conveniently ignored. Your Honor, I present to you unreleased security footage from a nearby convenience store, Sarah said as she placed a laptop in front of the judge. This footage was never included in the evidence presented by the prosecution. The room fell silent as Sarah played the footage. The image showed a different man running from the scene of the gas station, but what was truly damning was what he was carrying, Dante's wallet, but not in the place the police had claimed it was found. The man was running in the opposite direction, away from where the police said Dante had fled. Mason sputtered in objection, but Sarah wasn't finished. She had more. And now let's talk about that wallet, Sarah said, turning toward the judge with a sharp look in her eyes. We requested the forensic report. And guess what? The only fingerprints on the wallet were from Officer Luke Dawson, the officer who arrested Mr. Harris. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Officer Dawson, sitting in the back, stiffened visibly. Sarah turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. Officer Dawson, she said, her voice unwavering, how does a wallet that was reported stolen a full day before the crime end up in the perfect position to frame an innocent man? A cold silence settled over the room. Then, before anyone could react, Officer Dawson shot up from his seat and bolted for the exit. But it was too late. Sarah had already filed a motion to investigate him, and a cover-up was beginning to unravel before their eyes. It took the jury less than an hour to deliberate. When they returned, the foreman's voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable hint of shame in his tone. Not guilty. Dante let out the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Some people cheered, others fumed in anger. The tension was palpable, but for Dante the world seemed to slow down. Mason stormed out of the courtroom, his career in shambles. Officer Dawson was immediately placed under investigation and Dante was free, but the damage had already been done. He was a marked man and he knew it. Even as he walked out of the courtroom, his thoughts were clouded with everything he had lost during this trial. Reporters swarmed him outside the courthouse, bombarding him with questions. How does it feel? One asked. What's next for you? Dante looked past them, his gaze drifting toward the city that had nearly swallowed him whole. Finally he spoke, his voice low but steady. Justice isn't about what's right, he said. It's about who holds the power. Today we took back some of that power. Sarah Ellis stood by him, her hand resting on his shoulder. And next time, she said with a smile, we'll make sure no one else has to fight this fight alone. Dante nodded. He wasn't naive enough to believe this was the last time he'd face the system. But for now he was free. And as he walked away from the courthouse, he understood something crucial. He had won, but the fight was far from over. The fight for justice wasn't over. It had only just begun. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping true crime tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. And remember, justice never rests, neither should we. See you next time.